Thank you, everybody, for your work on the budget. That is it for business this evening. We have nothing under general business and no additional items to add. And so the last item, or the last few things to go through, are there any council presentations this evening? Councilman Van Oven.
Thank you. As most of you know, on Saturday morning, December 13th, reports began to emerge that Immigration and Customs enforcement officers had convened at 1560 Avienda Parkway, where the construction of new townhomes continues as part of the Avienda Development Project, a project that this City Council and previous councils know all too well. Now, before I go any further, I want to be clear with you from the outset. My comments tonight are about process, transparency, and constitutional protections, not about whether federal immigration should or shouldn't happen. Those are important debates, but they're not what I'm here to address tonight. At 11:05, I received a text message from Lori Hokanen, our city manager, confirming that 2 men had been trapped on the roof by ICE. I asked Ms. Hokanen if any members of Chanhassen City Council were at the scene. She confirmed no other councilors were there. I had just come in from shoveling my driveway, and I knew how cold it was outside that morning. I immediately knew I had a responsibility to represent the residents of Chanhassen, to observe and understand the situation that was occurring right here in our city. I told my wife what was going on, and I felt that I needed to head over there, fully expecting her to object. To my surprise, her immediate response was, "You need to be there. Someone from City Council needs to be there." I layered up quickly as I could and was in the process of running out the door when all of a sudden I stopped in my tracks. And in that moment, I experienced a feeling that I have never personally experienced before in my entire life. I'm an American. I'm an elected official. I'm about to drive 5 miles from my home to observe a federal operation, and I felt compelled to grab my passport. Not because I thought I might actually use it, but because the situation just feels outside of our normal checks and balances. It was confusing. The feeling was ridiculous. It was overwhelming. It still is. But it's only now in the aftermath that I can start to explain the way or why I felt the way that I did, why I still feel the way that I do. And I'll come back to that in a moment. I arrived at Avienda and immediately observed 4 things. Number 1, a group of approximately 50 protesters standing on the sidewalk of the construction site. 2, a group of approximately 50 men and women, I assumed to be ICE agents, wearing masks and tactical gear, and in some cases, t-shirts and vests and jackets that said police or police ICE on them. 3, a small presence of the Carver County Sheriff's Office. And number 4, 2 men layered in construction gear, holding on to the exposed wooden trusses of a half-constructed townhome 2 stories above the rest of us. The temperature was -4. The wind chill was much colder than that, and yet here are 100 people in our city watching 2 men freeze on a rooftop. Think about that for a second. How is it that we've become so blinded by our own political bias that we force ourselves into a standoff like this? It wasn't long before the crowd of protesters started to get bigger and louder. Most of the yelling was directed at the masked men and women holding the line in tactical gear, but eventually the protesters turned around and decided to start directing their frustration at Lieutenant Stan, who was standing right behind me. They began accusing him and the Carver County Sheriff's Office of helping ICE. As a city councilor, I knew this was not the case, but it quickly became clear to me that our residents don't know that. I had been made aware that Lieutenant Stan and his crew weren't given any prior notice that ICE would be conducting an operation in Chanhassen. The Carver County Sheriff's deputies had merely arrived on the scene when reports began to surface. They were not there to assist ICE, but rather to protect and serve, as they always are. Their role, which I'm grateful for, was keeping all of us safe, and I felt compelled to defend them by speaking up. So I spoke to the crowd. I told them Lieutenant Stan and Carver County deputies were here to protect us, not assist ICE. I said that what was happening above us was not okay, and I meant it. I thanked them for protesting peacefully. I told them I would be here tonight speaking to my fellow councilors with the intention of bringing actions to address the fears and concerns of our citizens. Now, I asked earlier how we've become so blinded by bias to force ourselves into a standoff like this. The obvious answer, the one that will drive your immediate reaction to my question, is that we're a divided nation. We've been told that we can't agree on anything, that we're so entrenched in our positions that the stalemate that played out before us on an Avienda rooftop is a direct reflection of the stalemate we see at all levels of partisan government. And maybe you're right. But as someone who truly believes in democracy and the power of bringing people together, I'm optimistic that as Americans, as a nation, we can overcome this. Because in Chanhassen, we've proven that people with different views can govern effectively together. The 5 of us on this council almost certainly voted differently in the last election. I don't know, but we probably disagree on immigration policy. But we agree on something more fundamental, that the rule of law, transparency, and protecting constitutional rights aren't partisan issues. They're American issues. And here's something else I've learned in the 3 years on this council. The residents of Chanhassen, whether they vote Republican or Democrat, share common values. They want safe neighborhoods. They want transparent government. They want the Constitution respected. They want common sense solutions. And common sense is why I'm here tonight. To be clear, I'm not so blindly optimistic as to believe we can change the world and solve our problems with some actions from the city of Chanhassen. But here's what I do believe. I believe in legal immigration. My late father immigrated legally to the United States from the Netherlands in the 1950s. Legal immigration has made America stronger, and we should continue to welcome those who follow our laws. I believe that illegal immigration is illegal, and that border security and immigration enforcement are necessary functions of the federal government. People who enter illegally or overstay their visas should face consequences. I believe in our first responders, the people that put themselves in harm's way to protect us, and I believe specifically in the Carver County Sheriff's Office and Lieutenant Stan, who I know had my back on Saturday. They're trained professionals who are dedicated to upholding the laws we've created and do so with transparency, dignity, and respect for human life. They also operate with warrants, with judicial oversight, with accountability, exactly as our Constitution requires. And finally, I believe that all law enforcement, whether local, state, or federal, must operate with transparency, accountability, and respect for constitutional rights. When federal agents arrive in our community without coordination with local law enforcement, without visible identification, without warrants or judicial oversight, they create a situation where constitutional rights could be violated, where innocent people could be caught up in enforcement actions, and where our local officers are put in an impossible position. This isn't about whether ICE should do their job. It's about ensuring they do it in a way that respects our Constitution and coordinates with local authorities. Which brings me back to my passport. Why did I feel compelled to bring my passport to observe what was happening in my own city? Because when law enforcement operates without clear identification, without coordination with local authorities, And without visible legal documentation, any American should be concerned. It doesn't matter if your father was an immigrant like mine, or if your family has been here for generations. When the checks and balances we rely on disappear, when we can't verify who these masked agents are or what legal authority they're operating under, everyone's constitutional rights are at risk. For just a moment, set aside your personal views on immigration and consider where we are, in the United States of America, in Minnesota, and now in the city of Chanhassen, a group of armed people with their faces masked can show up in our community possessing no identification, no warrants, no documentation, no prior notice to trusted local officers or officials, and perform whatever type of operation they choose to execute that day. Take the hot button of immigration out of it for just 1 second and consider what we're allowing to happen, and honestly, how crazy that is. Now, I know people will inevitably say, well, Councilman Van Oven, if you're all about common sense, then common sense would tell you that 2 men evading ICE by clinging to a frozen rooftop are probably illegal immigrants. Maybe. Or maybe they're construction workers who know very little English and are skeptical of a group of masked, armed individuals. Or maybe this group of masked individuals were on their way to a completely legal operation in another city, and while passing through Chanhassen saw 2 brown guys on a roof. Which brings me to my point. Maybe is not good enough. Our democracy is not based on maybe, but rather on burdens of proof, transparency, and checks and balances. Maybe is not the standard our Constitution demands. And if you ask me whether I'm willing to do whatever I can to protect and defend the constitutional rights of the residents of Chanhassen, the answer is not maybe, it's hell yes. So moving forward, I know 2 things to be true. 1, given the circumstances of tonight's meeting, this being a special meeting, the rules don't allow me to introduce a new item on the agenda that was not previously published for the public. Council presentations, this agenda item exists to give me this floor to speak to you, but I can't formally introduce actions for this council to debate and make decisions until a future meeting. And number 2, this is Chanhassen City Council. We're not going to change federal or state laws in this chamber. That's neither our role, nor do we remotely have the power to do it. Any attempt to do so would be a wasted effort. And so my requests will be focused on asking this council to affirm and act on the things within our control. Let me be absolutely clear what I will not be asking. I will not interfere with federal immigration enforcement. I will not declare Chanhassen a sanctuary city. I will not prevent ICE from operating in our community. We don't have the legal authority to do any of those things, nor am I even proposing we try. The suggested actions I intend to bring before this body will ask us to affirm our commitment to a diverse community that welcomes legal immigration and respects the rule of law. I'll ask that we affirm our commitment to the safety and security of all residents, businesses, and visitors while supporting lawful federal enforcement efforts. I'll ask that we affirm our commitment to upholding the dignity and respect of all individuals and ensuring that constitutional rights are protected during any law enforcement operation in our city. I'll ask that we request advanced coordination from federal agents. I'll ask that we require clear identification, that we establish that any law enforcement personnel operating in Chanhassen should display clear identification and be able to articulate their legal authority to local officials. I'll ask that we direct our city staff to document any instances where federal agents refuse to coordinate, refuse to identify themselves, refuse to provide documentation, and I'll ask that we report those to the appropriate oversight authorities. I'll ask that we protect our constitutional rights, that we reaffirm that all persons in Chanhassen, regardless of their immigration status, have constitutional rights to privacy, due process, and freedom from unreasonable search and seizure, and that local resources will not be used to violate those rights. And finally, I'll ask that we support our sheriff, that we clarify the role of the Carver County Sheriff's Office in these specific situations, ensuring residents understand they are here to protect everyone's safety and constitutional rights, not to assist in immigration enforcement. As always with this council, my hope is that where we land in the coming weeks will not be my individual resolve as it is today, but our collective resolve. I've only shared my thoughts on these with the people in this room and by email some thoughts for these council members to consider. And after they've had a chance to read through it, this body, I hope, will come back together in a public forum and transparently express those positions in respectful debate. After all, this is how transparency and democracy works in America. Thank you for the time.
Thank you, Councilman Van Oven.